Good evening. Welcome to this month's Town Administrator's Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Maio. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, David. How are you today?
Doing well. We're in between snowstorms.
We are in between snowstorms. Yeah, I'm hoping that it won't be so bad, but we don't know. There will be a parking ban. You heard it here first on WCAT. There will be a parking ban. Sorry about that, but hopefully it won't be too bad.
But the good thing is, by the time we do the next show, we'll be well on our way to spring.
We'll be well on our way to spring.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that also means that this is February,
Yep.
and we are now talking about annual town meeting.
Yeah, it seems like we're always talking about the annual town meeting or the regular town meeting. I think there's 2 days in July and a day and a half in August that we don't. But yeah, we're always looking at the budget and what's going on.
That's right. And this year it's going to be on Saturday, May 8th,
Yeah.
beginning at 8 a.m. Same arrangement as we've done the last two, with seating in the field house and also outside under a tent for those who
feel a little bit safer out there, yeah.
Yep.
We certainly are, we got very positive feedback from almost everybody involved last few years. We will take a better look at some of the acoustics inside and outside, I guess, because we did have some people that said that was hard to hear, and maybe that's because I mumble. I don't think it's because I mumble, but we will look at that. And we are very concerned with, accessibility and things like that. But it's kind of a very tough dynamic right now with what's going on with the
Right.
pandemic. But I think for the most part, government has continued. It is very safe, very socially distanced inside the field house and outside. And to my knowledge, of the town meetings that we've had here, this will be the third, we haven't had any outbreaks attributed back to it. So I'm pretty happy with that. And actually, I think at the November town meeting, we had a pretty big crowd for a November town meeting.
we did, especially toward the end of the day when we had the zoning questions.
Yes, yeah, yes.
We seemed to pick up on that.
Yeah.
But in both cases, the delayed annual town meeting last year and the regular town meeting in November, people seem to respond very well to the new way of doing it.
I think that, the new way, and I think the new time, I think the new day, I think people, from what I've heard, you're not going to make everybody happy, right? But most people seem happy with the Saturday. I think it's, people don't have to rush home from work
Right.
or school or what have you, and then they're tired, they're not wanting to go out. Now, yes, the flip side is that, you give up a Saturday. And I think that the first Saturday in June, in the June town meeting, was so hot. I can't believe it was that hot. It was much better that
You were inside an AC.
I was inside an AC. But it was much better that we had that town meeting inside because it was cool for people,
Right.
as opposed to a lot of people had mentioned, or a number of people had mentioned, having it on Landrigan Field, which would have been, I think, much harder for people to get to. There's a long walk up there, and it would have been baking in the sun.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And actually, the second town meeting in November was quite pleasant.
But also, when you look at, let's say an average annual town meeting is 4 nights.
Yeah.
If we go back to the Monday, Thursday that we've done for so many years. 4 nights, 4 hours a night on average, 16 hours.
Right.
We did the whole annual town meeting in 7 hours.
Yeah. It was a
In
long
one
7
fell
hours.
Not that long.
Not length. I would hope that going forward, if the community decides that they like the Saturdays, the date, I would hope that going forward, without the pressure of the pandemic, like we really want to get in and out and limit the time, that maybe there is a break, a nice long break in the middle of the day.
Sure.
Maybe there is a group, a community group that can be selling lunch or sandwiches or coffee and stuff like
Right.
that in the cafeteria when we go back to the middle school auditorium, Veterans Memorial Auditorium at the Galvin Middle School. And, have a little more camaraderie.
Right.
Which is really what, in a lot of communities, and you and I have talked about that, that's what it's about. It's kind of a fun day, so.
And people did seem, obviously I was outside in the tent, and people did seem to respond very well to doing it that way. You know, it is a little more complicated this way, making sure everybody is checked in and everything else, but people cooperated, people were good about it, and I don't think we had any real known problems doing it the way we've been doing it.
I certainly didn't hear of any. I think the other thing, the other enhancement, I'll call it an enhancement that we made, was the whole consent agenda aspect. And a lot of communities do that, where we all know at town meeting there are a handful of articles, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, that get very little discussion on.
Right.
And don't really deserve a lot of discussion.
Right.
And they'll come up, and what you can have is you can have a consent agenda where there'll be a brief explanation. Everyone can agree to take those in one motion. And if any one member, this is the moderator's rule, if any one member of the community that's there wishes to take that article out of the consent agenda and discuss it, it's removed. So no one is disenfranchised. I mean, we have the annual article of eminent domain,
Right.
where we appropriate $1. So, you know, if, and that only comes in the case where you're doing a curb, the road is going in, you've got to like take a little bit of somebody's property and there's nothing paid for it, hence the $1.
Right.
You know, we can just do that, you know, through the town council, through the DPW and what have you. You know, not a lot of discussion should be. Of course, eminent domain is a huge discussion, right? If you're actually going to have an eminent domain taking. Right. But I will tell you, there's a lot more than $1 attached to that usually. So that would be a separate article on its own. So I think that was the other part that, you know, we're making a lot of changes. People, you know, people cherish the open town meeting in Wakefield, and we both know that. And this allowed to make a couple of other efficiencies on it. So it's worked well. Moderator worked very hard. The assistant moderator worked very hard, as did the town clerk. So I thought it worked out, you know, very well. And not to mention WCAT and the setup and our DPW guys that had that place. Like, they had mapped it out. So it was really perfect. So May 8th, 8 a.m., let's look forward to it. And I hope it's not too hot. I hope it's not too nice of a day, so you're giving up a beach day or anything, but we'll get the town business done.
We don't want rain for those of us
We
who
don't
have
want
to be
rain
outside,
but maybe, you know, maybe 60 and a little breezy might be good.
It would definitely be an improvement over last June.
That's true.
But that also brings us to, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic and everything, tax income has taken a hit. What is this going to mean for state aid in the fiscal 2022, which begins July 1st?
Well, we have what's called the House 1 budget, which is the governor's initial budget. It usually comes out around January, and it has. And one area that we did very well, I felt, in state aid for next year was unrestricted local aid. And that it was increased by more than 3%. And Governor Baker has consistently said that that will be increased by the same amount that he projects the state income to be increased.
Right.
So he did follow suit in that. And actually, the state income overall, based on last year's numbers, hasn't been doing too badly. Go figure. But that's been done pretty good. The other big part of local aid is Chapter 70, which is the educational funding.
Right.
And the SOA, or the Student Opportunities Act. That area, to me, fell a little bit short. It was still the first round of that, so it could change. That probably went up about 1.5 or 1.4% over last year. And that's about a $7 million to our bottom line. So that, I'm hoping that when the legislative process goes through, that'll be increased a little bit, because education costs aren't going down.
Right.
And there are a lot of items that need to be upgraded over last year because of the pandemic and how things are being taught. Will schools be open completely in the fall of 2021? I certainly hope so. We'll be in somewhat of a hybrid mode. But there are going to be some catch-up being done. And that's across the state. I'm not saying anything about Wakefield. Wakefield's doing really better than most, I think, and really better than the vast majority, keeping kids in the classroom. But it's not the same as it's been, and we do worry about that education gap or that learning gap that happened in the last year because of the situation that we're in. So there are going to be more resources that are going to need to go there. So I was hoping that Chapter 78 would go up a little bit more than it did. Let's see what happens. I'm looking at that aid as about $150,000 to $200,000 less than I wanted it to be, or was projecting it to be, I should say. And the amount that we're being charged for charter schools are a little bit more than I had hoped, maybe $100,000. So I'm about $250,000 on the wrong end of where the state was coming in. Not bad for $12 million, but still not exactly what I wanted. So
Right.
I'd like to see that coming a little bit closer. But all in all, not as draconian as we thought it was going to be back in a year ago. We were really concerned, a year, maybe 10,
Well, yeah,
11
quite
months
frankly,
ago.
with all the businesses closing and restaurants basically more or less out of business for months at a time, and greatly reduced business since, receipts weren't looking all that wonderful.
Yeah, they weren't. And interestingly enough, for Wakefield, I think, and for the state for that matter as well, I think we're following the same trend. The local option meals tax and state meals tax did not suffer as much of a hit as we thought it was going to, and that's because of the robust takeout business. So I think communities have all stepped up and done a lot more takeout business.
Right.
That does not reflect the fact, however, that a lot of people are out of work, that a lot of people are not making as much as they were. You think about your waitresses and waiters and bartenders,
Right.
who really are the public face of the restaurants. That people aren't coming in, so they're not getting their tips and they're not getting that. So that is a whole other huge issue that we're seeing.
Right.
So, but that was not as bad as we had anticipated, and hopefully, I think the outdoor dining really helped in all communities, so that helped too. But I tell you, one issue in revenue that really has been down for us, and has also been down for the state, is hotel motel taxes. That has plummeted to about 10%, 20% of it was last year, not last year, but the year before.
Right.
And that's a fairly good nut for us in Wakefield. So that's a loss of, maybe we get about $600,000 a year in that. So now we're looking at maybe $2. So that's something that we look at, and the finance committee and town council, we've really forecasted that all out to say, all right, let's we cut it back on what we were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be pleasantly surprised, hopefully, but let's go forward and work on that lower number. So that's those things are looking not as robust as they were, but again, not as bad as we had thought. So that's positive.
So what's, with all of this in consideration, what is it looking like the effect on the budget for fiscal year 2022 is going to be?
Okay, well, everything else being equal, I think you'll have to remember that we, reduced fiscal year 2021's budget by about $1.7 million.
Right.
At, in between budgets being approved by town council and FinCom, and then going back before we went to town meeting. So a big part of that was our capital program. 10 years ago, we spent, $250,000 on capital, which was woeful, right? We've built that up over the years, working hard and prioritizing, and some great work between the departments and the capital planning committee, which does a great job. And we had that up to $2 million, sometimes over $2 million a year, okay? For fiscal year 21, we cut that in half in order to meet the issues of the pandemic.
Right.
And I always tell, people, it's not that we don't have the money, it's timing. So your timing is off. Your timing is next year. So, but our plan for fiscal year 22 is to go back. So really to replenish that $1 million. So move capital planning up to $2 million. And capital planning, I so people know what it is at home, it's police cars, it's new playgrounds. I mean, one of the items that was we had to cut last year, and painfully so was a new playground, or a replacement playground, I should say, at the Woodville School. I'm anticipating that's going to be one of the first things put back in this capital plan. Get us back to the 2 million. Police cruisers. We had a pretty robust plan of replacing police cruisers, so we didn't get really hit with a big nut at all. We went from 3 cruisers normally a year to 1 in fiscal year '21. We'll probably move that back up to 3 cruises in fiscal year '22. Things that are on the dock to be done, pickleball court should be done this spring. But there are some other things that I'd love to do that we're talking about in the capital plan. How do we do it? New roof for the Hartshorn House. How do we handle that? Improvements to the Civic Center. How do we handle those?
Right.
Not to mention the normal wear and tear when you go through our schools and public buildings that are used for those purposes. So, replacement of DPW equipment, technology, refreshing the technology. So looking at all of that, I'm anticipating a pretty robust $2 million spent in fiscal year '22. And as it happens in every year, we have capital requests for like $4 million or so. The first $1.5 million is easy to get rid. It's that last $500,000 to get to the $2 million where we have the anxiety
Right.
and the agita over. So, but the capital planning does a great job. They meet with the department heads. They really have a good feel for what's needed and, frankly, what is a tier 2 level.
Right.
And this is all needed. And the department heads are good about not asking for things that they know is not going to happen. So be a good, robust meeting again this year, and I anticipate that handling going really well. One thing that we also have learned this year is that during the pandemic is that the public has a great thirst for public access and for an ability to tune into all the meetings, okay? And one thing that really has, I guess, worked out well is that with all these meetings on Zoom, right, they're all on the town website. They're all on, most or if not all of them are rebroadcast on WCAT.
Right.
So you can actually see every meeting, almost every meeting and every subcommittee meeting that we have.
Right.
Okay. So before we just had minutes to look at, you can actually see the meeting. You don't have to go down to town hall to see the Board of Appeals. Okay, that is actually on Zoom, and you can see it and learn about all the projects. So in a way, the community has really enjoyed that, and
Right.
many members have. So the question is, when we do go back, and we will go back to in-person meetings, and I'm old, you know what, I like the in-person meeting. I think that,
So do I.
you can read the room better, you can see what people are thinking, you can,
And there's a point where you just get tired of looking at a
Right.
screen.
right, and that's why we're back here, right?
Right,
We
right.
got tired. So, but there are those people who can't make it out, it's not convenient for them to make it out,
Right.
but do want to be informed. And frankly, we don't have the staff at WCAT, volunteers and paid professionals, to go and film every meeting.
Right.
All right? So we've got to figure out a way to make that work. And it may be that in each meeting room, spending some capital funds on having, those bubble cameras in the ceiling. Not ideal. You're not going to get the same cinematography that you get with WCAT coming in here and having camera people and what have you, but it's probably better than Zoom, and it's going to give everybody a chance to really see the meetings and see how government works.
Well, for a
And to-
long time, the selectmen meetings had their own system
Yes,
that had been installed many years ago
Right.
in a partnership between WCAT and the town. And that system aged out,
right.
and it was better to bring the selectmen and the school committee into Studio A.
No, I agree. And but
Maybe providing a new system for that space could solve some of the problems.
and that is in one of the capital plans, and
Yep.
the problem will be, or not the problem. the challenge will be to make sure that whoever's chairing that meeting flicks the switch on, flicks it off, that we get a version that can be done. And that'll
Right.
take a little training, but you know what? I think that we're up for that challenge. After all these other challenges we've faced, that doesn't seem to me to be that daunting anymore.
No, and you know, it looked a lot worse at the beginning than it turned out to be,
Exactly.
you know?
You know, I'm proud of Wakefield, and with the help of WCAT, we did end up in early March or mid-March canceling, I would say, one round of meetings because we just didn't have the ability to meet in conformance with the open meeting law, according to the governor changes that he made.
Right.
And we certainly couldn't continue to meet in these rooms because there wasn't social distancing.
Right.
So a couple of these other committees, not the town council always met, but I would say within a week or so, we set up the whole Zoom issue. All our committees met, and I'm really very proud of them because some of our neighbors didn't meet. You know, this started in March, right? This started in March. Didn't meet until September. So took 6 months off where commerce stopped.
Right.
If you had a project in front of the Board of Appeals, guess what? It was tolled. It was stopped during that time.
Right.
So I think that Wakefield, with WCAT's help, really worked out great on this. So very proud of them.
And, you know, we have time for one more item on the list, and we'll pick up with the other items in the next show in March. But one of the things that Wakefield can be particularly proud of is the MGLD.
Yes.
The
Yes.
gas and light department here in Wakefield, when we have had some of the very serious weather that we've had in the last couple of years, the number and severity of interruptions in Wakefield have paled compared to some of the communities around us that are served by the more commercial interests. And in a lot of cases, what problems did develop were repaired and people were back online within 1 to 9 hours as opposed to 1 to 9 days.
Right. Yeah, and that's really because of two things, or two overwhelming factors. The first is that you have very dedicated employees at the MLD, and they're out in the storm. They're out fixing these issues. They're there to get you back online, so to speak, and they take a lot of pride in it because that's that is their calling, is to
Right.
do that. The second issue is the preparation part. Now, Wakefield for years has kind of divided the town into quadrants, and each quadrant each year is trimmed. The trees are trimmed, so those suspect limbs are taken care of, and next year they go to quadrant 2 and quadrant 3, quadrant 4, and back when things happen and there are complaints or concerned citizens calling on things. So those two things really worked out really well, and I'm really interested now when I hear about, Eversource or whatever, National Grid, blowing their own horn, saying, well, they had crews out and they trimmed before the storm. We've been doing that all year long. We've been doing that for years as part of our standard operating procedure. So don't
Right.
go out and tell me that before the storm, you guys run around and cut a few limbs to look good. So, but you're absolutely right, and you hear about other parts of the country, and they have different issues that they're facing, but it's going to be days. Guys, it's going to be days. It's going to be days and before you get your power back. Doesn't happen here. I remember one day it was the beginning of the football season, and I lost my cable, and it had to do with the wire going into the house, and it had to do with some live wire at the MLD, and within half an hour, there was an MLD truck out there, and I just called the regular number, figuring
Right.
there's no way it's going to happen today, right?
Right.
Out there fixing that, electricity voltage that was going off, and then boom, everything was fine. So really, what an interesting, a great service, and on the gas side too. So I think we're very, very lucky. So one of the articles at town meeting, go back in a very long-winded way, is that there are two items at town meeting. There is the streetlights that we pay for
Yep.
as a community, which is about $188,000 a year. And those are low voltage lights that have been replaced. And actually, that number will come down once the capital is paid for to handle that. And the other is the payment in lieu of tax program, where the light department pays, I want to say, $860,000 a year in payment of lieu of taxes. That number I'd like to see increase a little bit, and they all know that over there too. So maybe that'll be the next thing that we can talk about at some point.
Right. But that's one of the articles that the voters have to vote on in
Correct.
town meeting, is that transfer of, for lack of a better term, excess profit from
Right.
the light department to the town
To cover,
accounts.
right, to cover some of the different accounts that the members of the MLD, whether it's health insurance or, things like that they partake in. So, yeah, it's transferring to make sure everything is paid correctly.
Yep. Keep all the accounts in line.
Absolutely. That's what we try to do.
Okay, so we will pick up on the list of items for annual town meeting in our next program. But in the meantime, just to remind everyone, Saturday, May 8th at 8 a.m. in the field house, or if you choose in the tent in the parking lot
Correct.
outside of the field house for annual town meeting.
Right, and I am hopeful, extremely hopeful, that in the regular town meeting, the fall town meeting, the November town meeting, we are back in the more comfortable, more acoustically pleasing Galvin Auditorium, Veterans Auditorium at the Galvin School.
It's certainly easier than trying to get a radio signal from the parking lot
Absolutely.
into the field house.
Yes, absolutely.
That seems to be our weakest link right now.
Right.
So something to solve between now and then. Hopefully, we will also be seeing better weather soon. Spring is on its way, even though the groundhog in the middle of a snowstorm saw his shadow.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how that works, but that's okay.
I think it was a put-up job.
Yeah. Well,
I think it was a put-up job. But in the meantime, I hope that everyone out there continues to be safe and healthy.
yeah, please remember, even though we're very close to the end, I think, of this pandemic, please watch your distance, watch your hands, wear a mask. Really, stay safe, everybody. Don't think just because you got one vaccine or you got the second vaccine that you are suddenly immune and can do whatever you want. Really be smart out there and just stay safe, Wakefield.
Yeah,
So, thank
continue to work together, and we'll all make it through.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next month.